If everyone can take their seats, we can start promptly. While everyone's finding their seats, I hope everyone had a good evening last night and your head aren't as thick as mine from the Belgian beer. I'm feeling terrible, so if there's any lack of flow for today, blame the Belgian beer, okay? So I'm not normally this unprofessional. So first things first, I would like to remind people that there is Slido, so we have a few panel discussions today. So if you have any questions related to any of the panelists, please raise them on Slido. And I think the Slido is C3S GA, so please have a look at Menti and jot down your questions. The other thing is there's going to be a prize for the best poster and demo. So Anka Brookshaw, my colleague, told me to keep it as vague as possible, but I have heard she's open for bribes, so any poster presenters or demo presenters, please go to Anka. Anything else? I don't think I've forgot anything else, which is positive, so I'll leave on a good note. So first up is Chiara. Oh. Yep. Okay, brilliant. So please have a look at the presentations for this afternoon and raise the questions accordingly. So Chiara, floor is yours.
Thank you. Is my mic working? Yes, okay. So welcome everybody to this morning session. I'm very happy to see many people even after the wine of yesterday night. So this session today focuses on operationalizing climate services. So in practice, we will give some space to our users, and so we will have a conversation with them today. And this session really wants to approach us and to give different examples. Sorry, this is not the slide related to the session, but okay. What we would like to highlight here is to bring to you the importance of working in partnership. And in the program today, you will hear from the European Network of Transmission System Operator, NSOE, and the European Investment Bank. The added value of coordination and integration activities. So we have first presentation about the Copernicus Energy Hub. We will highlight how we work to produce operational data and how they become relevant in decision-making processes. And finally, we will highlight synergies with other services. So please, there will be not a panel discussion at the end of this session. So if you have questions, please ask your question at the end of each presentation. So we start the session with an example of coordination and integration activities. That is the Copernicus Energy Hub. Stijn Vermote is invited to speak about it, and he's the head of user outreach and engagement section at ECMWF. So welcome, Stijn. And after Stijn, we will have the presentation by Andreas Zucker, who is policy officer at the European Commission DG Energy, and he will highlight, how those activities are relevant from a user perspective. So. Welcome, Stijn and Andreas.
Thank you, Chiara. Good morning, all. I will give a quick update on the Copernicus Energy Hub. Let me see how this works. How do I do this? The green button. Oh, okay. Yeah. So what are the Copernicus thematic hubs? It has already been presented last year at the previous C3S General Assembly, but we only took it into operation since November. And we see it as a new way to reach users. In Copernicus, at least at ECMWF, we focus on user engagements from 3 different approaches, and you will see them all throughout the different presentations. On one side, you have how we deal with countries, so we have the national collaboration actions. This will be presented later on. We have the expertise domains, which comes with the Copernicus services and the experts and the technical colleagues developing applications. But then we also have the specific areas on how we reach towards the different user communities on these applications. We have the KCEO, that's the Knowledge Center on Earth Observation, and linked to this we have thematic hubs, which supports this on specific topics. The European Commission decided last year to launch 4 pilot hubs, 2 implemented by Mercator Roussillon, that are our colleagues dealing with marine, and they focus on the Arctic and coastal areas. At ECMWF, we focus on 2 others, one on energy and the other one on health. The one on health is implemented through CAMS, and the other one on energy is implemented through C3S. What's specific about these Copernicus thematic hubs is that it's not only focused on one service, it brings together the input from the different Copernicus services, but also other space components like implemented by ESA and EUMETSAT, and make sure that we have a user engagement layer to make sure that we reach that specific community for all the different services. So we act here on behalf of all the services, not only ECMWF, it's not only C3S. What's important with this is that we want to make it traceable back to specific institutional policy needs at European, national, and international level. And we want to achieve, of course, something which is user-friendly and talks to the user community. So we need to translate the words which we use to a language which is understood by that specific community. The main goals of how we see the hubs at ECMWF is to coordinate, so the coordination between the different entrusted entities who implement Copernicus, to also exchange thoughts, to talk about linked projects and initiatives, to connect, of course, with the user communities and to bridge with scientific knowledge and technical expertise and connect this with specific user needs. And this is very important because we, all scientists, all technical people, understand the data and we know who to talk to if we need some specific information. And this then needs to be translated into something which is tangible for users. Of course, when we engage with users, we want to collect user requirements, what we call user intelligence. We want to understand who they are, why they use the data, and what exactly they want from us. And we want to inspire. What I mean is that we want to make sure that we showcase what we're doing. We want to illustrate to user stories or use cases. And by this, illustrate the added value of the services and make sure that other users also look into this and pick it up. And the last thing is collaboration, which is of course key. So the Energy Hub in a nutshell, first of all, you have the link up there. So it's available. It's still a beta version, but you can already have a look. So on one side, it provides a single point of entry, easy access to data. We want to showcase and inspire, and we want to build a community of practice. So these are the 4 elements which you will find in the Energy Hub. Now, what does it mean for us? On the left side, you see what Copernicus is standing for. So the different services, but also the infrastructure layer, the satellite component, and the in-situ component. And the screen is really... On the other side, you see what we can bring as the Energy Hub. So we really make sure that all this data is collected, that we interact with the specific user community, and that we take into account these needs. We have an advisory board, which enables us to work with, to get advice, because we have to admit we are not energy experts ourselves, so we need to have this link with people who know how the energy community thinks, and DG Energy is one of them, as well as IRENA, NSOE, and RTE. And based on this, we have data sets and information which are centralized, delivered on a full, open, and free of charge basis and quality assured. This is an overview of data sets, applications, which we already know. So based on discussions which we had with colleagues, we identified these as potential data sets. Of course, there's more to come. There's much more behind this, and we also have to look more into the details, what in addition can be provided. Another element which is important are the showcases and to inspire users. I mentioned this before. Here you see an example from CAMS. It's a project which we have done 4 or 5 years ago, focused on solar radiation. And we want to collect more and more of these type of things. So we also want to collect information from the Marine Service. We want to collect information from from the land service, and really showcase the added value of Copernicus to the energy community. So this can be simple use cases, stories, testimonials. All this type of information is important to showcase and to make it visible. Now, summer 24, and I assume, well, it's not summer yet, but we will soon go into this, and we are really ramping up the implementation actions. So it became operational in November, and as of now, because we had to establish some contracts, as of now, we really will go into a more operational way. And we will focus on two things: the website. So when you go there, you see it's a beta version. We really want to make it much more high level. On one side, we invest in content writers. So we have outsourced this, and we receive bids, and this will now be decided. And then we have another consultancy contract through Evenflow, who will help us to manage this type of things and implement this. The second layer is the community of users, which is very important to do this engagement, to listen, to make sure that we understand what are the needs. And this is also implemented through Evenflow, but we also have a contract with Alpha Consult and Design and Data to define our value proposition and to develop some tangible outputs. So this is where we are. I think a lot of the discussions you see afterwards feed into this, and that's also something which is very important to take into account, that all these things are connected. An example of something which is also connected is the partnership with IRENA. So with IRENA, we will have next week the International Energy Workshop, which we sponsor. We have a pre-meeting where we really illustrate what Copernicus is providing, and not only Copernicus, but also ECMWF and Destination Earth. And this is really one example of how we really want to engage with the user community and want to make sure that we collect the data and information needed. And this is my last slide. I think that's also important. We need to hear your voice. We need to hear the voice of the energy audience. And I know I'm talking to the other side, but if you know people who are really, some are not, so some are really into the energy domain, but if you know people who are really into the energy domain, please ask them to share their information. Ask them to get in touch with us. So I mentioned here Julie Letetre. She's the Copernicus Hubs coordinator. So you can send her an email, say, look, they have a very nice application based on C3S, CAMS, the Marine Service or the Land Service. And based on this, we can really build this whole thing. That's it. Thank you for your attention.
Andreas, please.
Good morning. Does it work? Yes. Chiara, Stein, thank you very much, and thank you very much to Copernicus to giving me the possibility to speak at your General Assembly. I'm coming from the European Commission, from the Directorate General of Energy, and today I'm going to give you just a little idea about why what you do is important for us in terms of policy. So I'm not going to go very much into the underlying data because there are more qualified people speaking after me. But I want to tell you actually why the work you do is relevant, is getting increasingly relevant for the Directorate General Energy and related ones. What is the reason for that? Well, we have started to look to the longer term in our energy policy making. In particular, well, now it's not that long anymore, to 2050 and beyond. So we started with these exercises around, well, a decade ago, and in 2018 we worked on a long-term strategy development, and the latest reason for looking at the long-term development of the energy system was the climate law, which implied the publication of a 2040 climate target plan that is about making a proposal for setting climate targets. Now, climate target, that is part of the legislation that had been passed during the last years. That comes from climate, so that's not energy policy, but the relationship to energy policy is obvious to most of you. In terms of if you decarbonize, if you become greenhouse gas neutral, this mainly means eliminating carbon from the energy system, thus completely changing the way energy is produced, transformed, and used. And so that means that the primary energy mix we know today, or we might still remember from 20 years ago, is continuously changing. And along with energy efficiency, we will have a very strong move to, first of all, using carbon-free sources, mainly renewable energy, as we believe, but also nuclear, and also trying to use much less energy. Not going to go into details. The sector that is most affected by this, so energy is of course much bigger, and today the electricity sector is just a small part of the energy system, or not a small, but it's not the majority. But increasingly, the energy system will get electrified. So the end use of energy, the consumer will use much more electricity rather than today, as we do today, fuels. That means that the electricity system has to grow enormously, and what you see there is basically the idea that the electricity system in its size will have to double, about at least or even more than double. This is putting a lot of homework, of course, on those organizations that are responsible for planning the infrastructure of this system, but also it poses a number of questions on the actual transition and the policies that need to be in place and the conditions that need to be in place in order to allow this transition. Because, as I will show in my next slide, that will require investments. So the energy transition is actually a story of investments. It's an investment strategy, and the main part of the investments will be on the supply side, because half of it will be on the supply side, half of it will be on the demand side. I'm going to, so the demand side being the investments you have to make in the systems and assets that consume energy. That will be a complete replacement of the capital stock in some industries, as the current assets or the current production means are running on fossil energy. Think about steel productions, for instance, but also about the transport sector and the heating sector, where we have very strong ambitions to electrify. So this is the demand sector, where in principle many of the assets that currently exist will not be in usage in a few years from now. Meaning a lot of capital has to be mobilized to allow for these investments. And of course, the supply side means investing in a sufficient amount of energy production. And this is, of course, the transition away from fossil to renewables and nuclear. And also other technologies like carbon removal technologies. Let's not forget that can also play a role. And you see that this means a continuous investment over quite a long time frame from today, and it actually means much more, up to 3 times as much as we have seen during the last decade. Now, how does it interact with what you are looking at? Well, the sources in which we will have to invest will be renewable, and they will be variable. They will have a variable production. So first of all, you see that the amount, and that means something for the system. That has an impact on the system. It's not the same as building a new gas-fired power station. You see on the left slide the electricity generation from photovoltaics and the EU27 during the last 5 years, from 2019 to today, and you see an enormous growth. So it surprised also some in the energy world, but we had 19% annual growth, and we have now more than double the production of 2019. That is, and here you see the cumulated production over a year, how that changes. Of course, you see the curve is steeper in summer as there's more sun. Now, what does that mean? On the right side, you see a graph that shows you let's say, the average generation on an average day from photovoltaic, and this I took France as an example. And you see that in 2019, the peak was somewhere at 4,000 megawatt. It's now at 8,000 megawatt. So 8,000 megawatt, what's that? That's like 8 big nuclear power stations. And this has a profile. You have no production during the night, of course, in the early morning, and no production during the evening, but a production of, let's say, 8,000 megawatt. The peak consumption of France is sometimes kind of 10 to 12 times that much. That is significant, and in some countries it's even more. What does it mean for the system? Well, it of course interacts with the markets, because if you have this fluctuation of this on the supply side, you will of course have a change of prices because the supply is higher during the peak production, and that translates automatically to this to the shape of electricity prices, which are now very much depressed around noon. They used to be higher than average at noon in the past. Now they're lower than average because of this solar peak, while prices are still very high in the evening. And this profile is getting more, so getting increasingly complex, or no, let's say increasingly the spread between high and low prices will increase over time. On the other hand, there's a second, and that is one of the most important things to consider if somebody makes an investment into renewable energy. That you will get, that there's not one electricity price over the whole day, but you will capture the price when the sun shines, and that is getting increasingly low. You need to think about that. The second thing is, of course, the prices of electricity is to a very large degree impacted by the price of natural gas. This is the way the market worked, and this is the price of electricity over the last 5 years. You saw the roller coaster ride, and that is what kept many of us busy during 21 and 22, when we were very much worried about what might happen when electricity prices, kept on rising. This is, of course, due to the ongoing war in Ukraine and the related disruption of gas and the weaponization of gas. Now, what does it mean for investments? Well, investors, an investment into, in particular, renewable energy is capital intensive. So in order to operate, to generate renewable electricity, you need to make an investment. You have relatively low operational costs, meaning you have to put your capital in your investment upfront and then hope that you capture enough money in order to repay the loan or in order to be profitable. In the past, in order to introduce renewable energy, we had subsidy schemes. They were very different from member state to member state. And now, increasingly, as the renewables are now not a small part, but will be the major part of the electricity system, we had to integrate, and we're increasingly integrating them into our market design. And when we think about the design of the electricity market, what we are working on, of course, and what our colleagues from the market unit have published is our proposal for schemes that allow you to stabilize your revenues. So you can imagine that, and these are the so-called contract from difference and power purchase agreements. For the time being, what I want to tell you, what I want to show with this slide is if you want investments in renewable electricity to happen, think about the slide before. It means you need to put systems in place which allow some revenues, some stable revenues to the producers, so that they can plan their business. And I'm not going to go into the details. There are discussions, of course, about the details, description of such schemes. There are options for that, and there will be more. The member states will make proposals. They will have the possibility to implement those. They will have some margin of implementation of such schemes, but has become clear that we will probably not see the investments needed unless we have some form of market mechanism that allows you to have stable revenues. So why is this all important? In order to make the assessment of the electricity system, of the energy system, and in order to understand possible market development, we rely on weather data. And in fact, the whole electricity market as we know it, but increasingly the energy system will rely on meteorological-driven sources, and we would not be able to make any plans without the data sets, which I think the next person speaking will have more to say about, but with data sets and with methodologies and models which originate from the work that you do. I could have shown that in some detail, but on purpose I did not, because I think you know enough about it. But I just want to thank you for the work you do, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Andreas. And I think unless there is a very urgent question that, of course, we can try to answer right now, in the interest of time, I would move to our next speaker. And so first, thank you very much for mentioning the importance of the weather and climate data. Actually, we have also heard during the first panel discussion on Monday, how important is the challenge related to the energy security. So I'm happy to invite on the stage Aaron Zuiker, who is system modeling specialist at ENTSO-E, the European Network of Transmission System Operators. And we work together with ENTSO-E in partnership. We co-develop products based on C3S and on the Climate Data Store. And of course, we do this in collaboration with other experts, colleagues who are sitting here, ICS, DTU, Armin, and Arte France. Please, welcome.
All right, thank you everyone. Thanks for having invited me here to speak to you and explain a bit on the collaboration that we have with C3S. And so I'm going to explain a bit how we're benefiting and using some of their data. So first a bit about ENTSO-E, for those who don't know. ENTSO-E is the European Network of Transmission System Operators for Electricity. So these are essentially the companies or institutions who are responsible for maintaining and operating the transmission system, and also those that are responsible for keeping supply and demand in balance at all time, essentially to keep the lights on. We have at the moment 40 member TSOs from 36 countries, and recently the latest member that joined is Ukraine. So now Ukraine is also coupled and linked with the rest of Europe. Our members together, they serve a bit more than 500 million citizens. They maintain 500,000 kilometers of transmission lines, so that's really a big power grid that we have to manage collectively. And so basically, being in the midst of the energy transition, there's this huge exercise to always prepare for the next step and to be able to be prepared for all likely scenarios in the future, because keeping the lights on today it's not just an exercise of today, but also one of tomorrow. And as you could already see in the previous presentation, is now that European countries are implementing their national energy and climate plans, this is really increasing the amount of renewable and decentralized generation capacity in the grid. So this leads to more electrification, large energy storage projects, and we really need to accommodate for this, because there cannot be an energy transition without transmission. So we need to make sure the power can actually flow from A to B also in the years ahead. And the way we collectively do that is we conduct these system development studies. So with system development, I mean both studying the market aspect of the power system as well as the network side. So given all of these changes, economic, demographic, technological developments, how should the ideal network look like in the future to be able to deal with all these changes? And one of these studies addressing this question is what's called the European Resource Adequacy Assessment. So in short, ERA. And what ERA essentially does is it tries to identify so-called adequacy concerns. An adequacy concern is when there's a risk that the demand cannot be met by the supply, which can potentially lead to power cuts and ultimately maybe even to a system-wide blackout, which is, of course, something that we really have to avoid. So the way we do this is we try to identify these adequacy concerns for all the individual European countries within the European context. So we have this large pan-European power system model that we build every year, and then we run a whole bunch of simulations that then put the system under stress, and then we're going to see if the system can adequately deal with these moments of stress. So once we identify those issues, then there's still enough time to guide policymakers' decisions on regulatory and investment intervention, so we can properly tackle these issues on time. And we're also legally mandated by the EU to conduct these studies every year. So that's about ERA. So we look ahead 2 to 10 years ahead. But in addition to ERA, we also have seasonal outlook studies. So it's essentially the same exercise here. We try to identify resource adequacy issues of risks, but this time on a shorter time frame. So we look ahead just a few weeks or a few months. So the uncertainty that's still quite large with ERA, it's already lower with seasonal outlook, because we already know the existing generation fleet that we're going to have in a few months. We know quite well which large power plants will be under maintenance, so there's a lot less uncertainty there. And then again, once we identify these potential risks, our members still have some time to increase regional, national, or even European coordination to properly address these issues. So both ERA and seasonal outlook, they focus more on the market side, the generation part of the power system, but we're also looking ahead further into the future, more at the network side. So we have this study called the 10-year Network Development Plan, in short TYNDP, and TYNDP looks a bit more in detail to the actual network. So how should the network develop to be able to accommodate for all these changes and to be prepared for all likely and scenarios. So again, uncertainty increases, of course. You look further ahead into the future, but we must look ahead quite far, because these network development projects, they can take quite some time to implement. And what we do in TYNDP is essentially two things. So on one hand, what we try to do is we try to model and evaluate the societal benefits that planned and proposed grid reinforcement projects will have in the network. So basically anyone can submit these projects to the TYNDP study team, and then we actually build them in the network models that we run for future years. And we're going to see, okay, how is this beneficial? Is this project worth to implement? That's what we do on one hand. On the other side, what we try to do is we try to identify where there's the largest need for system improvement and system reinforcement. Because maybe the projects that we need the most are not actually submitted by anyone. So we also need to know, okay, where is this need, where's the need the largest? So that's a bit all these system development studies that we do. So how is this all related to climate data? Well, it's probably not a surprise to you, but they're all heavily dependent on climate data. On one hand, there's the load forecast. So we have to estimate, okay, what is the demand going to be in future years? It's directly related to the climate and weather conditions, because as you know, the higher the temperatures in the summer, the higher the demand for cooling. The lower the temperatures in the winter, the more you have a demand for heating. So it's heavily related. Also more and more the supply side, because we're phasing out fossil fuels with renewable energy generation, which means that all of these renewable energy sources, they also directly relate to what the climate and the weather is going to do. So there's this increasing influence of climate and weather conditions. So this entire data set of climate data that we use in our studies is what we call the Pan-European Climate Database. And so far our studies have been using the PCD, so it's in short PCD version 3. And PCD version 3 is essentially historical reanalysis data. So we're always looking at the past. We're looking at known cases of extreme weather events that we saw in the past, and we include them in our models, in our simulations. We put the system under stress, and then we're going to see if we can still accommodate for such events to happen. However, as we can already see today, the increasing effect that climate change has. So we have an increasing number of extreme weather events. Their impact is increasing as well. So it's not sufficient anymore to look at the past, because the future, as we know, is looking very differently. So there's this limitation of PCD3 that that only allows us to look at the past. So we really needed to change our method there. And that's exactly why we partnered up with C3S for the development of the next version of PCD, so PCD version 4. So this is a partnership that we have with C3S, in which ENTSO-E decides sort of sets the requirements on how this data set should look like. And then together with their subcontractors ICS, Armin, and the Danish University of Technology, they compute and generate the necessary climate data for projected years. So we get this data for wind speed, temperature, precipitation, and solar irradiance, and we get them from 6 different climate models from CMIP6. So that's a lot of data, going all the way up to 2100 for also 4 different greenhouse gas emission scenarios. So that's a lot of data. And also what we get with that is that the subcontractors, they also build these energy conversion models that then take this climate data, train these models also based on data that our member TSO shared. So they trained these models that can then compute the necessary renewable production data that goes with these climate data and these conditions. So that gives us this enormous data set from which we can start sort of cherry picking extreme weather events that could happen in the future. So this way, yeah, we can better prepare to any changes that might occur due to climate change. The nice thing about this data is that it's public data. It will be publicly available to everyone for all study purposes. So in, I think, 1 or 2 months' time, it will be available for everyone to download on the climate data store of C3S. So that's really nice about this data. And now this data is being already used for the next edition of ERA, so ERA 2024, which will be published somewhere next year. Now it's also being used by the Summer Outlook study and also next edition of the Winter Outlook study. And then starting autumn, it will also be used for TYNDP, which we do from which we release one every 2 years. So now we're basically changing all our studies to use this new version of PCD. And after that, it's also very likely that our member TSOs will also start adopting this data for the national studies. So it's really gaining momentum now, which I think is a very good thing. With that, I want to end my presentation, and I would really like to thank C3S and the subcontractors for their combined effort for allowing us to benefit from their data and to really help us and the TSO community to adequately prepare for a carbon neutral power system of Europe. So thank you all for listening.
So thank you very much. So I think we are a bit late. Do you have a urgent question? I have several, but I think but actually I think we have no time. But we can find our speakers, of course, during the coffee break, so feel free to ask them questions offline. And in the interest of time, I think I invite our next speaker right now. The next speaker is Roman Roehl from the European Investment Bank. So we are again in highlighting the added value of working in partnership. So Roman is a climate change specialist at the European Investment Bank, where he leads on the management of physical climate risking projects. And I'm sure that Roman will do a good job to convince you about the importance of reliable and transparent climate information for the bank and for the finance sector. Welcome, Roman.
Thank you, Clara. How much time do I have?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, excellent. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting the European Investment Bank. I'm here to speak to you about our wonderful partnership we have with ECMWF and the Copernicus Service. I think I need to use this tool. I have no idea how this is used. Chiara, can you show me how I switch the slides? Okay. All right. Thanks. So let's get the context out of the way. Why does the EIB even care for climate data? Why are we even here, and why this partnership? So the answer is quite obvious if you know the European Investment Bank well, but not everybody does it. The EIB is the lending arm of the European Union. So it's a bank, it's a public bank, and we support projects for EU policy priorities. And as we are all very much aware, strengthening climate resilience in the EU is a big priority, and it's getting more and more urgent, unfortunately, as we move deeper into a climate crisis. And the European continent, the European Union, is exceptionally vulnerable despite its prosperity. And the EIB is a public bank financing a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the networks that keep us going every day in all member states and beyond. We are financing the green transition in the economy. So it's a private sector financing that we have, where we have an interest that this obviously delivers the green impact that we want to have, including bringing down our emissions. And we operate in 160 countries globally. So we really have a pretty broad reach. And we have the opportunity to direct our financing to have really the biggest impact on the policy side. And that includes increasingly adaptation and climate resilience. So our lending in that space is going up, and that's what we want. We're doing a lot of internal work in the bank to scale up our adaptation financing. We've been doing this for several years, for many years. And however, what is really new is a number of legislative or regulative initiatives in the EU. There's a lot to be said about it. I can't go into detail, but basically we have regulation in the EU now that sets out how we can label sustainable finance, similar to an organic food label that many of you, I'm sure, know. And it includes criteria for managing physical climate risk in investments. So you basically can't call something green finance anymore without showing that either there's no risk from climate changes or that those risks have been managed. There are more regulatory initiatives that make market participants disclose whether they see vulnerability in their business model and how they are addressing it. This is becoming effective next year. So we have basically a regulative incentive or push to start thinking about climate vulnerability and the impacts of climate change, data-based, and how that impacts the economic activities of pretty much every public and private actor of a certain size in the European Union at the moment. So this means this expands our mandate at the EIB, right? It means we can play a much better role in directing the financing there, building capacity, etc. That's why my title of the presentation is not just about the partnership, it's also about how we can empower building resilience through the EIB. And it's really important, and I can't stress enough how central the right climate data is to this mission. It's absolutely crucial, and we are making a lot of progress, but we are not there yet. It doesn't really work smoothly yet. Climate data translated into the political impact that we want to have is still a challenge. And that's where our partnership with ECMWF is super powerful. So how does that actually look like at the EIB? How do we assess physical climate risk? In lack of, as you know, standardization and market practice around this subject matter, it's fairly new. We are obviously using the regulative guidance that we can find, which being part of the EU family for the EIB is the taxonomy. The taxonomy, for those of you who ever managed to go through the legal text, you will find a table, which is the one on the slide, which sets out all the climate hazards that you're supposed to screen and assess your economic activity against before you can say it's either not at risk, there's no material risk coming from climate change to what I want to invest in, or it leads you to further assessment of how you can adapt to these type of hazards. And if you look at them, and to be honest, the table goes even on, I couldn't fit it all on the slide, but it's a lot of different hazards. Each of them has multiple potential indicator and data sources behind it, depending on what sector you're looking at. So the complexity that is behind this table and putting it into practice is immense. And we have started to implement this. And here's an example for it, but before I say more about this, I should add that the EIB has started to screen and assess investments for physical climate risk about 5 years ago, so before this regulation came. And we started to use climate data services for this purpose, and we've learned a lot on the way. And now with this partnership, we're basically trying to take this really leapfrog to the next level. And some of those examples are summarized like that. We get a project proposal for, say, an infrastructure investment, could be a water utility or a grid operator or train operator, for example. And then we need to look at the project and as quickly as possible determine what type of climate hazards of this list could be relevant for this project, for this sector, for this location of the investment of the infrastructure. And then based on this screening, we need to take a decision on which ones we can explore further with more sophisticated data analysis, and whether we need to talk to the promoter of that project about material risk. And then it's obviously crucial to have a productive and constructive discussion around this potential risk in the project, because it could delay the decision to finance this project. So it's a significant point in our due diligence, and having the right data and interpreting it is absolutely crucial. So just one example, in our screening we had an agriculture project in the south of Europe. It's not really this location, it's just for demonstration. But one of the immediate questions is my project at risk from water scarcity, from aridity, drought, etc. And in order to answer this question, basically our not too sophisticated system gives us a flag that this is a potential problem for the sector, and then we need to figure out how do we get to the bottom of this, right? So in the past, this meant we had to look for data that the promoter is using, maybe research and consult different climate service providers, public ones and commercial ones that we are subscribed to. And it was really, really difficult to do this. You know this better than I do, standardization. We'll get to this, right? And with the Copernicus data services, we basically have now a #1 go-to stop to really look for quality, controlled data from obviously an authoritative source, and see if this is applicable if we can use it for our project. So for example, this one is an aridity index downloaded at NUTS 2 level, and it shows you the expected change over a timeline that is actually relevant for the project, for the lifetime of the project. You can select, you know how this works better than I do, but it's so valuable for us to be able to select the time horizon, to select a high emission scenario for a conservative risk approach, and these type of things. That is extremely powerful for us, and we've started to use this over the last few years, and it's really been an eye-opener on the potential of the partnership between our organizations. Another example is a JRC research piece that we used that was using Copernicus data on wildfire for a battery plant. In this case, and that's equally important, the previous case clearly showed an uptick, substantial uptick in aridity. So that means we need to talk to our client about this subject. Here, we had an indication of wildfire historically in the location, so we got a risk flag for this project. But the data can tell us for the lifetime of our investment, there isn't a clear upward trend or a clear increase in risk, so we don't have to raise this. We can focus our attention on solving other problems, and that is also very important. So with all these experiences, we basically took the decision to go quite ambitious on our partnership with Copernicus and really develop a bespoke interface between our two organizations, where we want to be able to translate all the indicators that you have seen, match them with subsectors, and so that they are appropriately matched with the relevant data sources. And Copernicus is generously providing us with the data processing side of that, and then it's our job in the bank to build the software and the due diligence procedures to pick this up and translate it into risk, and translate it into modalities to talk to our project clients in a more informed way than we were able to do this in the past. So this is what we are all working on at the moment. We are basically in the middle of getting this off the ground, so I can't show you too much on the screen yet, but I'm sure we'll be coming back with more results on this and show you how we are putting this into action. Okay. How do we empower, right? What are we doing with this? So first of all, we made the climate risk assessment a requirement for all EIB projects. So basically, if anybody wants to access preferential financing from the EIB for larger projects, they have to be screened and, where necessary, assessed. So that basically means, in addition to the regulation that is coming, this is becoming an incentive to talk about physical climate risk when you develop projects. With the data, we are getting increasingly better to find the right questions to ask. So we don't intend to have like a mechanical decision to walk away from projects, right? If a project comes to us with a risk flag, it doesn't mean that we are not financing it. The opposite. It means that we see an opportunity, we engage, we can add value through, and that's the next point, when necessary, even free of charge technical assistance with experts, engineers in the field and so on, who can even discuss with the promoter what can be done for this project or a later iteration of the project to make it more resilient. And this is, again, a place where we can leverage the data, right, for the technical assistance engagement that we have. And then the EIB is obviously very much part of the financial system in the European Union. Also, multilateral development banks working outside of the European Union in development finance space in Africa, Asia, etc. We are working with commercial banks as well to scale up climate financing for smaller enterprises and so on. So if we get the climate data value chain to work between Copernicus, the EIB, and our clients, then we can leverage this partnership for a lot of clients, not just in the EU, but throughout the whole economy in many, many countries. So it's really powerful. Okay, what have we learned? You have to stop me if I'm talking too much, but we have learned a lot, so I need to speed up. Okay. First of all, it's incredibly hard to get this right. And it's easily said, but we continue to underappreciate and underestimate how complex all of this is on the science side, on the computational side, on the risk management side, on the engineering side, etc. So even though we are very optimistic and excited about this partnership, we also understand it will take time and a lot of brain power to get it really operational, to make it really have an impact. At the same time, it couldn't have been a better time to do this now, because the regulative environment has changed, and computational power is unlocking basically a new chapter in using data and bringing it down where it can have impact. And that makes us pretty clear actually what we need to do. And we need to do, firstly, we need to master usability. You have no concept of how challenging it is to cut through the complexity in a short amount of time in a bank, talking to a grid operator, for example, who's seeking finance. But we need to get this done. We need to get it right. The next one is we need to promote more standardization. We are talking inefficiently about what is the right data source, what is the right indicator, what is the right time horizon, what is the right quality of data. And it's really not a conversation a bank and a client are really good at. So we're losing a lot of traction there. And the worst thing is, this conversation is so daunting that it, in many cases, doesn't happen. And if it doesn't happen, we lost an opportunity to better understand vulnerability and fix it, if there is any, in all the sectors. And that's not what we want, right? We all want to have the policy, your service, our financing, get more impact on building resilience. So we need to get this, we need to continue learning on this, and this partnership is a big opportunity to do this. So finally, transparency, it's clear, we've talked about it a lot, but it's really important to understand what the data is, what it comes with, what the limitations are, and so on. And all of this will basically allow us to create a common language along the whole value chain, from the data, from the science, through the computational processing, to actual decision-making that is relevant for the policy impact that we want to have. And I couldn't be more excited about this partnership, and we can, if we get it right, we will demonstrate how this can be taken to the next step again. And I want to say thank you to Copernicus and ECMWF for doing this with us. It's an experiment. I hope we get it right, but I think it's worth it. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Roman. Actually, I let you speak more on your last slide. Was very inspiring, to be honest. So I left you the time. I think you answered several of the questions I had. So do you have, again, an urgent question for Roman? Otherwise, Roman will be available during the coffee break time. If not, again, I will invite the next two presenters. So now we highlight two different operational services. So in this case, the idea is to serve a vast majority of users. So we will get two highlights, one highlight from the agriculture sector, and I invite Allard de Wit, senior researcher at the Wageningen University and Research, to speak about the Agira 5 and agriculture products. And then after, we will have Stefano Tibaldi, senior researcher at the CMCC Foundation, who will highlight extremes in the winds and the relevance for the insurance and agriculture sector. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Yes. Yeah, my name is Allard de Wit. This work was done together with my colleagues Hendrik Bogaert and Steven Hoek, and also with Evelyn Muller from Major IQ, which is actually also in the room here, over there. This is about climate service for agriculture, and particularly on, let's say, the user's perspective on the Ag Era 5 data set. Well, Ag Era 5 is actually, it's a derivative of the Era 5 data set, but it's actually specifically tailored for agricultural users. So it has 22 daily variables derived from Era 5, things like minimum, maximum daily temperature, daily total precipitation, daily total radiation, because most of the users in agriculture, hourly data is just too much, you know. They are happy with daily values rather than having to process the hourly values coming from Era 5. Of course, it's a global product, but there are regional corrections for day, nighttime, because if you're converting from hourly to daily values, you have to take into account that what is day and what is night changes across the globe. So we take into account for that. There's an 8-day delay on real time. So every day there is a new update on Ag Error 5 based on the data coming from Error 5. But because we need 2 complete days of Error 5 to generate 1 day of Ag Error 5, there's a little bit more delay on it. It has been operational since 2020. Originally this was developed with input from ECMWF Mars, so that's the Monitoring Agricultural Resources group of the European Commission, and CIMMYT. CIMMYT is the International Institute for Wheat and Maize Research, part of the CGIR. It's a fairly popular data set on the CDS, as far as I understood from Copernicus user support. I don't think we can fill 2 stadiums with Ag Error 5 users, but still. And since October last year, Wageningen University Research and Major IQ, we have a contract to actually support and maintain the data set. Now, just to give you an example of what it looks like, this is a total precipitation from the 1st of June 2024, so that's 3 weeks ago. And actually, we clearly see in the south of Germany this huge precipitation event which generated this flooding in Germany. But as we all know, this weather of, let's say, a lot of rainfall, a lot of rainy days, this has been going on at least since mid-October last year. So, for example, this is a news article from a Dutch site which basically says sugar beet harvest is continuing despite the rainy weather, but 63% still has to go. And that was beginning of November. So that's already pretty late for sugar beet harvest, because actually sugar beet and many other crops were actually delayed because of a wet spring in 2023 already. And of course this is ongoing. We actually experienced it last night together with all this rainfall when we had to walk up to the Bellevue Museum. And now the next one is saying basically, well, farmers have to put a lot of effort in sowing basically the last sugar beets. And the same applies to potatoes and other crops for which you need heavy machinery to get on your field. For example, when you look at the field at the left, for example, you see that those heavy machineries are basically destroying the field. So that's completely destroying your soil structure, and that will actually have an impact on the crops which are being sown next year. And actually, this will have an impact several years after this event. And actually, I saw a news article yesterday evening which was said that actually they expect the vegetable prices to rise because farmers are not able to harvest and so basically harvest for things like spinach, for example, because they have a lot of problems with this wet weather, and also there's a lot of more impact of pest and disease at the moment because of this rainy weather. Based on this new contract that we have for supporting Ag Error 5, one of the first things we actually did was a so-called gap analysis to find out what are people, where are they using Ag Error 5 for, and what problems do they experience, and things like that. So we basically did a kind of user analysis where we interviewed 3 key users, the GRC Mars group, the Geodata group of the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is they're also operationally using Ag Error 5, and CIMMYT again. And we also put a online questionnaire where we had 51 responses in total. This is basically the distribution of the different users. Well, there's a large group where we don't know it actually because they didn't provide any answer, but we have about, the 6 over there, that's commercial, institutional, and scientific. They're kind of distributed. So there's also commercial entities which are using Ag Error 5 operationally. Well, what are they using it for? Well, actually, most of the use is on the left side. Well, yield forecasting, running crop models, climate reporting analysis, exactly the things that we were developing Ag Error 5 for is what the bulk of the users are using it for. But for example, also you see that hydrological modeling, a simple hydrological model which run on daily time steps, they have enough with Ag Error 5 instead of Error 5. So that's interesting. And well, what do Ag Error 5 users want more actually? Well, first of all, they said that we want better documentation. We want product guidance. How should we use it? And how does it compare to other gridded meteorological products? For example, if you go to the CDS, you find Aero5, you find Aero5 Land, you find Ag Aero5, and if you search a little bit further, you find Ag Mera and W5E5. And if you're not into the, let's say, the details of these products, it's actually quite hard to understand which one you should take for a particular application and which one is not suitable for a particular analysis. And also understanding of uncertainties and limitations. For example, you see a lot of people who are just plotting station weather values against Ag Aero5, and they say, well, the correlation is horrible. Yeah, because that's also the difference between a grid box and a station, which is on maybe a particular location. So this is the kind of, well, educating your users on how to interpret the data and the uncertainties and limitations. They also want some additional variables. Evapotranspiration, the Pemberton-Monteith reference evapotranspiration is very high on the list. And we can compute it easily from already the current set of Ag Aero5 variables. But it's actually quite computationally intensive to do that. So if you can already pre-compute it for users, that's a big win. Soil temperatures is another one. Particularly for survival of winter crops, that's an important one. So crops which are sown in autumn, like winter wheat, which are then going dormant through the winter and which start to grow again in spring. Well, depending on the conditions during the winter, so particularly the low temperatures and whether there is a snow cover which is enough to insulate, they will survive or not. And then finally, improve product access. Some users say, well, CDS is nice, but give us S3 buckets. That's easier for us. Others say, well, CDS is nice, but I would like to have direct access to time series, and I want Excel files and CSV. And that also relates to my next one, because one of the questions was, what is your IT environment that you're using to process Ag Aero5? And surprisingly, about 2/3 of the users says my laptop. Can you imagine, my laptop is not powerful enough to download and process a rather big chunk of Ag Aero5. So this is, well, putting a lot of users who are using Ag Aero5 into a difficult spot, because they are basically using their laptop to process a considerably large data set. And of course, there's also another, let's say, more institutional part of the user base which says, okay, well, I have access to cloud environments of databases managed by IT departments where they say, okay, they do it for me and it's fine. But the fact that there are so many users, they are using their own laptop to process Ag Aero5, that says something about the way we make the data accessible to them and the limitations there. And it also comes back to the next point, because if you ask them, well, what data access options would you want? And then the most of them, they actually say, well, make me able to download time series for specific locations. For example, NASA Power, I don't know whether you're aware of that service, actually has this kind of functionality. And other ones, they say, well, let me explore, plot, visualize Ag Aero5 data on the CDS directly, so I don't even have to download data. There are also, well, cloud access, calculate additional indices on the CDS, that's actually also requested, but the bulk is really on the left side. So that gives me my final remarks. Well, first of all, I would say, I think what you read through the lines is that Ag Aero5 users really appreciate the C3S for its high quality open data sets. And Climate Data Store, CDS, generally reported to work well. However, many users would really prefer other types of access than just NetCDF file. I mean, the CDS is just basically a NetCDF storage facility, and you can download them, but that's about it. So direct access to time series would really be preferred. We actually had a toolbox app that did that, but they are disappearing with the new CDS. So maybe it's not nice to say, but in a way we're going backward with the new CDS rather than forward. And that way you would sometimes like to have the CDS work a bit more like a data analytics platform rather than a NetCDF storage facility and download facility. At the same time, maybe C3S doesn't have to do it. For example, there are other parties that are jumping on this bandwagon because they identified this limitation. For example, there is this company which is called OpenMeteo, which is actually providing the datasets on the C3S through an API for very fast time series access, because they already saw this limitation of the climate data store and they basically solved it. And I think that was my last slide.
Verde qua, questo? Questo?
Yes, the big one.
The big one. Yes, it's amazing how many points of in common our experience with this sort of comparably small project there are with the previous presentation. We'll be talking about this enhanced windstorm service, which deals with wind extremes data for insurance sector, but in this case we have sort of focused a bit on particular type of clients of the insurance sectors, which is agriculture and agroforestry customers. You remember the idea of the first level customer and the final level customers. This is an example of such a case. Well, first of all, why a windstorm service which has been operational for quite a few years? Well, development of knowledge-based assessment of the nature and temporal evolution of windstorms associated with extratropical cyclones, the classical west sort of perturbation moving west to east at mid-latitudes, detection and tracking of pan-European potentially harmful windstorms of interest to insurance sector stakeholders. So the existing, let me call it old, WISC service became operational windstorm service, but it holds data up to 2021, so it needed some sort of revamping, and therefore why an enhanced windstorm service? Use of a better and more up-to-date database, ERA 5 instead of ERA interim, a complete 1940 to today year of data instead of just winter only, for example, the full year and the full available span of ERA 5 suitable for this sort of application. Add a new windstorm tracking algorithm to the existing one. The existing one in use is TRACK. We tried to see whether an alternative tracking algorithm called Tempest Extremes would allow us to evaluate the performance of the tracking algorithm, to see whether the two tracking algorithms were providing a similar picture of the world, or they were providing a different picture, because these tracking algorithms are not particularly accurate. Their accuracy, stroke inaccuracy, has to be evaluated quantitatively somehow. But even more, possibly even more important than that, make operational products update timely and automatically, taking advantage of the updated CADS infrastructure and enhanced tools, which the old service does not do. Enhanced friendliness of user interface, making it easier to explore the windstorm catalog, more interactive tools, again exploiting the updated CADs, and expand interest and information from pure insurance sector towards some insurance sector customers. I mean, really, this is an example, but the wideness of the possible customer interested in a service like this is really very, very large. The basic products of the enhanced windstorm service are these tracks, which are based on the use of two detecting tracking algorithms. And after the tracks, once you have sort of computed the tracks, you go to the footprints, which means you try to compute the area which was affected by the passage of the system, following the tracks, trying to see what maximum value of 10-meter height wind gusts during the specific event. The latitude range, you will see it in the figures. The entries in the catalog will follow the version of the data set, the tracking algorithm considered, the storm tracks and footprint within the tracking algorithm. Users will be able to access the data and in a variety of different levels. The storm tracks will be organized by single storm, monthly events, or all events for the whole data set. The footprints will be organized in single event files with a unique, you'll be able to identify single unique storms with an ID number, with a name essentially, and then you will be able to download the original footprint, decontaminated and not decontaminated. I'll show you what decontamination means, and the downscaled footprint. The two-track algorithm, I'm not going to in any detail of the two-tracking algorithm, so it's not really. One is very classic track algorithm, which is based on 850 hectopascals relative vorticity. The other one is Tempest Extreme, which is based more or less much more on mean sea level pressure. The first track algorithm derives then the mean sea level pressure as a sort of a diagnostic variable after having identified the system with a relative vorticity. The idea is then you track this passage of all the storms, and then for every storm you try to compute this footprint, which is the area of maximum wind gust surrounding the passage of the storm, and then you try to decontaminate this map by making sure that you're not putting into other storms other than the one which actually follows the track. There could be other low pressure systems in the vicinity which you want to exclude, so you apply this decontamination algorithm, and then you apply a downscaling algorithm to add spatial detail down to 1 kilometer and improve the realism of the wind gust strength using a multiple regression model, which includes the orography, the wind gust as a direct output from Error 5, and the wind shear, which is also stuff which is available in the literature. It's interesting to see, if you take the 51 historical windstorms from the European windstorm catalog, you notice that only 32 cases out of those 51 are identified by at least one algorithm. So it's not an easy task. And then it turns out that if you try to sort of evaluate the ability of these two algorithms to track the right stuff, it turns out that it's difficult to have a non-suboptimal approach, because the XWS catalog that you use as the truth actually is also based on one of the two algorithms, which means that it is partially obvious whether one of the two algorithms will score better than the other one, because it has a lot of things in common. These are two examples. One is Daria in 1990, and the one is the Great 87 storm, which I particularly love because I had just left ECMWF when the storm, 15 days after, and I had just sold my house exactly where the storm passed, and I was so worried for the poor guy who had just bought the house, the enormous trees. This is the storm which turned 7 oaks in 3 oaks. Or 2 oaks. Almost all the oaks of 7 oaks were taken down. This is a sort of a statistics of the frequency by the two tracking algorithms, limited to October to March 1940 to 23. And once you see what are the areas where there is a higher probability, of course, higher statistics of the track crossing that area, if you then go to seeing whether there is a linear trend in these data, and you compute this linear trend considering the annual count, this is only limited to the cold semester, although the new tracking algorithm will be throughout the seasonal cycle. You bin them and so on, and it turns out that in fact, there is a positive, statistically significant trend in the period 1940 to 1923 of this passage, of the density, if you want, of the tracks, with one algorithm. The other algorithm, it's unable to detect this trend, and therefore I added a sort of a very personal judgment. Is 850 hectopascal relative vorticity a better indicator of a mid-latitude storm passage rather than mean sea level pressure? I would say yes. Mean sea level pressure is really not able to follow truly synoptic systems. And then you have a method to evaluate the footprint of given storms against observation. We use the Hadley, complete Hadley center data set of stations. And to make a long story short, the idea is that if you apply this downscaling algorithm using the height of the station and so on, and then the actual wind gust directly extracted from the ERA 5, which is a very good data, you can see that the downscaling algorithm is capable of turning the decontaminated ERA 5 tracks into something which scores much better in a direct comparison with the Hadley station point, which are as close to the truth as it can possibly be done. And this is very difficult to see because you have to see the colors of the little dots, but so you have to believe me. And then if you really limit to the little points of the station, you see that from original resolution ERA 5 to ERA 5 downscaled, the ERA 5 downscale has got colors, and in the right position, look at the arrow, so to speak, which are much more similar to the downscaled, or if you want, the downscaled have got the colors, which means intensity of the wind gusts, which are much more similar to the original not downscaled ERA 5. If you construct PDFs with these data, you see that the tail of the intensity, of the high intensity events becomes much more realistic with the downscaling, and which is really telling us that the windstorm dataset, this windstorm dataset represents a sort of a first of its kind European windstorm dataset, which will hopefully soon provide constantly, automatically updated tracks from two different algorithms and the associated footprints at original resolution and also downscaled to the 1 kilometer scale over the entire extended period of ERA 5, which is suitable for this sort of application, 1940 to now, means that it will be automatically updated as soon as the new data come in. And although the known limitations related to the grid-based versus observation point evaluation approach, ERA 5 generally demonstrates to represent the spatial patterns of footprints and the magnitude of wind gusts quite well, which was sort of a partial surprise given the extreme locality of the data that we have been looking at. And the added value introduced by the downscaling applied to the ERA 5 shows that even a simple statistical and computationally cheap approach can be a valuable complement to original resolution products for windstorm-related climatic risk analysis. One word on a user web survey that we did for the gap analysis part of the project. Essentially the same conclusion of the previous speaker, because the idea is that the sort of insurance company reflects the needs of their customers, and in this case the customers were agriculture and agroforestry customers, which more or less told us, although in a more limited number, because this were more modest type of gap analysis and web survey, but still more or less exactly the same conclusion. So I think that all these analyses could, in a way, be integrated into some sort of a wider look, and wider and broader, and maybe even deeper, in some sense, look of what the customers are asking us for. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefano and Allard. I'm sorry that we are very late, so we cannot ask you questions, especially related to passing from ERA 5 to ERA 6. That was my curiosity. But let's invite on stage the next speaker, the last speaker. So now the last presentation looks at the water sector. So if you were at the poster session on Monday, you may have noticed that there is a poster led by Sean Harrigan dedicated to the C3S operational water service that is coming in the next phase. And actually there we would like to highlight some synergies with the Copernicus Emergency Management Service. And now we would like to have the perspective of JRC on those synergies. So welcome Juan Acosta Navarro, who is project officer at the Droughts team at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission.
Thank you very much. We're glad that we're invited to show our perspective here between the synergies between CEMS, the Copernicus Emergency Management Services, and C3S. I also like to take the opportunity because in the previous talks we've seen all these societal sectors that require more and more climate information, and I think this particular synergy around the water sector is it's key and can be central to many of these different societal sectors. So let me just briefly start with showing this. Many of you might know what the 6 Copernicus services are. We are the emergency one. This is of course, it has to be 24/7 operational, and it's been live for about 20 years, and it supports actors in managing disasters in all the phases of the disaster. So I just mentioned it's a complementary to the national efforts by the member states and other countries. It's jointly coordinated by 3 Directorate Generals of the European Commission. So the JRC is the one doing the operational implementation and the technical coordination, but it's also coordinated by DG DEFIS, which is the Defense, Industry and Space Directorate General, and the DG ECHO, which deals with humanitarian aid and civil protection. So, yeah, as I mentioned, it's operating 24/7, and it's providing timely and accurate early warning and geospatial information for this better preparedness, response, and recovery to emergencies. If you see on the bottom, we have an early warning component of the service, which includes 3 hazards: the floods, forest fires, and droughts. So I'll be focusing on droughts and floods mostly, so because as you can see, the amount of people affected by these 2 disasters, it's by far the largest. It's above 60 million per year for droughts and above 75 million for floods. So either the lack of or the excess of water, it's highly important. Also in terms of economic impacts and obviously livelihoods and so on. So the floods aspect of CEMS, we work with the European Flood Awareness System. This is a first pan-European operational flood forecasting and monitoring system, and it supports the preparedness and anticipation of ongoing floods in Europe only. This is the partners, the EFAS partners, get notifications before to be better prepared for floods, and this combines a wealth of information from satellites, hydrological modeling, and meteorological and in-situ measurements. Now there's also the global flood awareness system, which is the twin of the European one. It is really a copy of that, and the only thing is that the difference is that it doesn't provide this warning, these alarms to the member states, but it can be activated. For example, I'm showing here an activation in Rio Grande do Sul, in Brazil, in the recent floods, and it shows the flooded area on the map on the bottom, and some numbers on the people affected, the buildings affected, the total area that was underwater, and the time it lasted. When it comes to droughts, we have also similar monitoring systems. They're called the European and the Global Drought Observatories, and they are also used to monitor and forecast droughts. As well, they rely on a big source of data from measurements in situ satellites, reanalysis, modeling, and so on. But in addition to that, we produce analytical reports more or less once a month, twice a month, once every 2 months to describe ongoing droughts in different parts. And there's also an interactive map viewer that the users can go on and look for all the data catalog we have on droughts. So just here we have the drought indicator. It's called the combined drought indicator, which gives an idea of the drought conditions for agriculture. This is just a few months ago. And just to mention, you can see the reports here. You can see a highlight of the drought in 2022. That was particularly bad. And also a recent product, the European Drought Risk Atlas, that I will give an example in the end about it, taken from there. There's very strong links, as I mentioned before, between SEMS and C3S. Many of the data we have is already available at the Copernicus data store. For example, the EFAS and GLOFAS multi-model seasonal river discharge forecasts are already available. Also, the historical reconstruction using these 2 models it's also available and includes other variables such as soil wetness, snow water equivalent, runoff, and soil moisture. This is both on the European and the global domains. There's a new beta version being tested of the data store exclusive for early warning, which you can see there. This will be hopefully operational very soon. Now, when it comes to collaborations that are existing between SEMS and C3S that involve both floods and droughts, we have we make an extensive use of ERA5 products, for example, as input for the hydrological model EastFlood that is developed at the JRC, and this is to estimate drought-related indicators, for example. Then SEMS plays a role as an external reviewer for C3S-related procurements. And to highlight also that there's a strong involvement in the European state of climate reports that are produced by C3S every year. There's either one section on river flow that it's done by SEMS, and also some when there's a spotlight like 2022 on droughts or the spotlight of 2023 on flooding. There was some collaboration. There's some maps that were part of the report. The last thing that is already an existing collaboration is our seasonal forecast product for droughts is based on CIS51, the seasonal forecasting system from ECMWF, and it looks ahead into 1, 3, and 6 months. This is being expanded into a multi-system product using all the available models at the data store. And also, we're working on the multi-system wet and dry will be available very soon. Then we're also working on one for hot and cold extremes to complement our seasonal forecasting products. Now, the question is, how can we further enhance the cooperation between both services? And I think that central to that, I mean, I chose this schematic, which is a particular schematic that aims at describing actions to reduce the risk of droughts, but it can be applied to any hazard. And it relies on 3 key pillars. I don't know if you can read them, but one is the implementing of monitoring an early warning system. One is the assessment of the vulnerability and the risk to that particular hazard, and the last one is the implementation of measures to limit the impacts. So more on the policy side. I think with all the quality data that is available through C3S, we can take this data and with our expertise prepare something that addresses all these 3 key pillars. I will show an example in the next slide of how this is being done already in the drought atlas report that I just showed before. So it is to go from hazard-focused early warning systems to risk-focused early warning systems. I chose these two examples, but as you've seen, there were, of all the talks before, there was most of them could be interested in this type of products. There's one for agriculture. We have the present-day risk. This is how current-day droughts impact the yield of wheat in Europe. And then, as you go to your right, we have how this risk is increasing or decreasing in the future in different warming levels. So in this case, well, the Mediterranean is particularly more vulnerable, but also parts of Western Europe. Now, on the one on the bottom is terrestrial ecosystems, and in this case, it's quite clear that there's the contrast between the south and the north. But this product has been developed using a large impact database that has been collected for the past 40 years or so by our colleagues at the JRC, and this impact database of drought has been translated into risk. So I think this can be very important for policymakers, for companies, for society in general, and this is, I think, where we can take the collaboration a bit further, not only looking at far ahead into the future, but also at the short scales in seasons, multi-years, and decades. So just to summarize, as I mentioned, there's already many existing synergies between the two services around water, and some more in the pipeline. But there's the possibility to develop even stronger synergies and exploit both the strengths of both C3S and SEMS to provide more valuable water products to the end user. So it sounds very generic, but I just showed a few examples of how this has been done and can be done. With that, I'd like to finish, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Juan, and thank to all the speakers who didn't stick to the allocated time, but we had a lot of nice information, so thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting session. So in the interest of time, we have one final thing to get through before coffee break. So the next is the final demonstrators for the elevator pitches. So, Chris.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce the demo session on the C3S learning resources. So you've already seen how to access the data from the CDS. You've seen how to explore that data using interactive applications such as a climate atlas and open source tools such as EarthKit. But you haven't yet seen all the tutorials that give you that first kind of push along the road should you wish to create your own custom processing. So your own custom visualizations, your own custom aggregations, unit conversions, dataset comparisons. So we have a lot of really nice Jupyter Notebook-based tutorials that go through the whole range of different climate datasets, from observations to reanalysis to seasonal forecasts and climate projections. So come and join me for the demo session. Explore what we have available, what you can use, what you can customize to your own purposes, and also hear what the plans are for the future. Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. And next up we have Claudia.
Hello, good morning. Copernicus is user-driven, isn't it? Many of you are from the user side, and this morning we heard many interesting presentations from users. But have you actually heard about Valentina? She's a teacher, and she uses Copernicus climate change data in her geography lessons. Or may I introduce you to Tom? Tom is a data journalist, and Tom needs easy access to the rather complex data that is offered through the C3S, because he's translating this data into exciting stories for his readers. So all these users, you and them and many others, they have different needs and different interests. And how to satisfy these needs and how to best address these needs, and eventually how to further grow the user base of the C3S. This is what ECMWF asked us to investigate, to be able to shape dedicated user propositions, value user propositions. Caught your interest? Then we are looking forward to introducing you to Valentina, to Tom, and to many others upstairs in the Gemei room now.
Fantastic. If there's a prize for best elevator pitch, that goes to these guys. Right. Michaela, next.
Hi everyone, I'm Michela from the ECMWF support team. So the aim of our team is to make the user experience with our product and services easy, great, efficient and effective. And for this reason, we design and implement a self-support user journey, which now include a new shiny discourse forum at forum.ecmwf.int. So please try it and please come along. We are in the Cyril room, and let us know all your thoughts about it. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. And finally, Isabella.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm Isabella Mazza, and I'm on behalf of the ECMWF Program Contract Management Team. I will invite you to come upstairs in the room Sira, where we can talk about contracts. And so we can show you some statistics or indeed open and upcoming opportunities. But also, more importantly, discuss the results of the survey that we have conducted at the beginning of this year among all our service providers. So thank you for your feedback already. And also we can, of course, discuss any feedback that you may have on our processes. We can also show you some snapshot of the contract lifecycle management tool that ECMWF is implementing and is expected to go live by the end of this year. And so if you are interested, please come upstairs and join me, Jimeko, and our colleague from the legal services team, Laszlo, in that room. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, so that's the end of the first session. So we're supposed to have a break now until past, but that's not going to happen. So I suggest come back at 1:45, make sure you're fully caffeined up, and make sure you mitigate the impacts of these chairs. All right, thanks. Thank you very much for coming back, and sorry the coffee break was slightly shorter than originally planned. So the next session is on the value of C3S partnerships. So I'll pass over to Jorn Hoffman, who's leading the session.
Thank you. So I hope the microphone is working. So we've already seen in the last session, before the break, some examples of what we do in partnerships at ECMWF. And so this session really aims at exploring a little more how we create value through these partnerships, what it brings to both sides, ECMWF on our side and also the partner institutions. And here I've selected a few that we have in most cases, I think all cases, have signed memorandum of understanding to substantiate these partnerships and really put down in writing of what they focus on. So I have a distinguished panel here that I would like to invite up on the stage. Stijn Vermote, head of the User Outreach and Engagement section at ECMWF. You've seen him a few times during the last couple of days already. Then I do have next Edward Coulthorpe from the European Investment Bank. Please come up. Then Ines Duarte from the Union for the Mediterranean. I do have Emmanuel Pajot, I hope I say your last name right, from the European Association of Remote Sensing Companies, and last but certainly not least, Giancarlo Pini from the World Food Programme. So please, a hand of applause to the panel. So what I would like to do now is, first give each of the panelists a few minutes to introduce what we do in these different partnerships, explain where they're coming from and what they're looking at with us, to give you also a little bit of a context, and then have a bit of a discussion around, what we can learn from this for others. First, I would like, though, to start with Stein from an ECMWF perspective to tell us what we are looking for, what you're looking for in making these partnerships valuable for us and the objectives that we get through the different programs.
Thank you, Jorn. Do you hear me? Yes. Partnerships are really the fundamental to ECMWF. In a lot of our activities, what we do, partnerships is really at the core. I'm not only talking about Copernicus, but also what we're doing on NWP, the partnerships which we have with ESA, with EUMETSAT, with other organizations to make sure that we assimilate all the observations is, for example, a key to us. In Copernicus, we also noticed that partnerships is very important to make sure that you reach a wider group of users. And that's why when we started with the second phase of Copernicus, so back in 21, really wanted to go for a more streamlined approach, which was more embedded in a formal process. And this has resulted in some of the engagements which we see here. One of the reasons why we wanted to have these partnerships is because we noticed if you really want to do proper user uptake, one of the best ways to do it is to do some on-demand applications. And Chiara, in her previous panel, showed this very well with what we are doing with the EIB, with ENSOE, for example. We really work together very closely with these partners to make an application which talks to them, which is relevant to them, which is used. It's not just a use case or demo case, it's really used for concrete applications. And that's proper user uptake. To get to that point, it sometimes takes a lot of efforts, a lot of things behind the scenes. Talks. It can germ at events like this, and then you pick up new follow-up discussions, and then you see, okay, there's a mutual interest. And that's one of the elements which is very important in partnerships. There should be a mutual interest, and there should be sufficient resources. We have the resources at ECMWF. We made sure that through Copernicus we allocate this element through the user engagement section. And this enabled us to do certain of these activities. So it's these on-demand applications, but also user uptake events, training. Training is very important because through training we can take the pulse of how well users understand what we're doing. We can talk and talk and talk, and then on the other side, users say, well, we don't understand, we speak another language, we don't know how to work with this data. And through trainings, we can facilitate this. A last point, and we also try to establish partnerships because sometimes these partners are used as a catalyst. So we have ERSC or other organizations which really are the gateway to a wider group of entities. And with ERSC, for example, is the Earth observation industry in Europe. And this is something which we can't do on ourselves. And it's also to create this credibility to get to those people, to say we work together with those people, those partners to get to those. So that's in a nutshell, in fact, why we're doing it at ECMWF, how we create value, and why we really want to continue this in the future.
Thanks, Stein, for that. So I took a few keywords from that. The training was important. I think some of you may actually follow up on that. And the catalyst element, of course, is also something that I think we'll hear a little more when the other panelists are engaging and having their introduction. But Edward, I'd like to continue with you. We've already heard Roman talk about a very clear example of what you do or what you're aiming to do with data that we provide through C3S. Maybe you can expand what you're hoping for in developing in this partnership.
Thanks, Jörn. Delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, everybody. Indeed, I have for me this is relatively easy because my colleague Roman just took you through in the earlier session the broad parameters of the partnership with Copernicus. I think from my side, I'm going to do a real quick summary. I just want to stress how strategic it is for us. I think how important it is. We're delighted to benefit from the partnership. And yes, its expectations are high. But let me try to explain briefly why. 3 points. So EIB is the European Investment Bank. We are the EU's public bank. And essentially, we're financing an awful lot of long-lived assets. So I think last year we financed 88 billion, which is significant at EU scale. And a lot of those are, assets that are going to be around for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Classic examples, the backbone of transportation systems, energy systems, industrial plants, etc. Okay, second point, we're a public bank. So it's crucial that we get sensible investments, sound investments. These investments are going to be paid back by future generations over 20, 30, 40 years. And it's important, clearly, that they're going to be effective, productive assets. And as a key element of that is clearly going to be that these assets are well designed for a world of changing climate risks. And I think there's 3 things that we're trying to typically get our heads around. One, so if we have an asset, in very practical terms, what are the risks that it's exposed to? Secondly, it's around trying to understand who owns that risk. I'm sure Elena Badram from the Commission was here yesterday or Monday and talks about a lot of these themes. Ownership of risk. Let's be transparent. Let's try to understand. Let's and have an open discussion around it. And the final element on the risk dimension is really trying to understand, it's a risk tolerance question. Are we designing to a 1 in 100-year flood, a 1 in 500-year flood, a 1 in 1,000-year flood? There's no right answer, but we need to have an open discussion around the risk tolerance. These are difficult issues, and I think for us, it's absolutely crucial that we can build from the relationship with Copernicus to at least start with state-of-the-art, high quality, high resolution data in order precisely to engage with our promoters and our clients, to have that discussion with them and to have a meaningful discussion with them. It's very easy to pose the question, have you considered future climate change? It's then very hard, or the challenge is then to unpick the response and to go beyond, I've designed this according to my national design standards. Thank you very much. So this is where I think we're coming back to the Copernicus partnership. We're really excited about the ability to learn from Copernicus, to have access to data, and then through our side to be able to help bring that to clients, turn that into a meaningful series of questions and data points to help to begin to get an angle and understanding on the risks.
Thank you for that introduction. Ines, you brought some slides to support your introduction, so I'd like to continue with you, and you already have the slide presenter in the hand, so please go ahead. What are you looking for in our partnership?
Okay, thank you very much, Jan. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation as well. I'm here as a representative of the Human for the Mediterranean, which is an intergovernmental organization. We're based in Barcelona, but we represent 43 member states, all of the EU member states, plus the southern shore. Unlike the IB, we're not a bank. We represent member states. We basically have, we foster regional dialogue, regional integration in the region, and we bring together the public sector, so line ministries of the region. And our objective is to reinforce both South-South cooperation and North-South cooperation. So in a nutshell, this is a process that started in 1995 and it's ongoing. And in terms of governance, we hold ministerial meetings and regional dialogue platforms at sectorial level. I'm here representing the Energy and Climate Action Division, and we do have a partnership that was signed in 2021. I mean, we know that our region is warming faster than the global average, and we call it the Mediterranean hotspot, actually. And this led us to 2 ministerial declarations that were signed in this topic, both in 2021, one on energy and one on environment and climate action. So basically these ministerial declarations brought together the energy ministries or the climate action ministries of these 43 member states and gave the UFM a mandate to work on these topics. We do have platforms and working groups on climate action and then on different energy subsectors. And why are we working on this? We are working on this because given the mandate of these ministerial declarations, one of our key axes is to reinforce the science policy nexus. And for that, we have 2 work streams, basically. One is to support MEDEC, which is a network of Mediterranean experts on climate change. They are normally part of IPCC, and they produce reports that are state-of-the-art. The other arm is with Copernicus, basically, and where the value added mostly is to have user-friendly data and state-of-the-art data for decision makers in the region to have access and have better policy making. So why we considered partnering with ECMWF? First of all, because of the unique expertise that they can bring to us. I mean, as an intergovernmental organization, we are not scientists. We are bringing together the member states, in our case, to discuss matters of energy or climate action, so the line ministries. But we need to equip them with state-of-the-art information and data. And bearing in mind that on the one hand, the EU is a very cohesive market, is a single market, but on the southern shore, we have markets that are fragmented along country lines. So this is the background where we operate, and the deliverables to date. We have developed together 2 apps that work as demonstrations, actually. So one was on the vulnerability of sea level rise and their impact on cultural heritage sites on the Mediterranean. And the second one was on the impact of climate change on the impact of vector-borne diseases. So we invite you to have a look and explore the demo cases, the websites. These were mostly produced to raise awareness because, as I mentioned, they are demo cases. These topics were chosen because they are very easy to draw attention. I mean, all of us, when we think about the Mediterranean, we think about the cultural heritage sites. And if we have a forecast that tells us that 47 of the 49 UNESCO heritage sites are actually threatened by coastal flooding by 2100, this makes us think. So that's what we want to accomplish. The same thing with the app for the vector-borne diseases, and we're talking about malaria, dengue, and other mosquito vector-borne diseases. Again, this mostly helps us to draw the attention. We launched these apps at the Mediterranean Pavilion at COP 2 years ago, and it helps us to raise a lot of awareness and bring this topic to the table. currently, we are discussing and in the process of, there's a new ITT that is being launched and that it's on energy. It will be more tangible. It will enable, for example, to select the better locations for renewable energy sites. So we're very excited to continue exploring this new partnership. And for us, this is a very tangible partnership. Our core business, in a sense, is very intangible. Sometimes we mostly foster a place of dialogue, of meetings between different member states. And this partnership brings us something tangible and concrete that it's, everyone can see. It brings us access to reliable data and also the expansion of data sets to the southern shore of the Mediterranean, because whether for the EU we do have reliable data, we did have an issue that sometimes ensuring the coverage of data to all of our member states in the southern shore, it's not so easy. So this is very topical and beneficial for us as well. And also, as Steen mentioned, the targeted training sessions are also very important for us, and it's a clear value added of this partnership. So let me stop here. I'm happy to have to expand a bit more in the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thanks, Ines. And I'll come back to some of the points that you brought up. But I would now like to give you, Emmanuel, an opportunity to introduce Perth ERSC, because I think some of the audience may not be aware of what that is and also what you are aiming for with the partnership.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am Emmanuel Pajot. I am the Secretary General of ERSC. ERSC is a strange acronym. I know it's difficult to say. It stands for European Association of Remote Sensing Companies. So we are a trade association based in Brussels, and we currently represent 134 companies in 25 countries in Europe. ERSC has a long history. The association was created 35 years ago. It was triggered by the need of a small number of companies who wanted to have a common voice, who wanted to interact with institutions, stakeholders. And at the same time, ESA wanted to avoid direct interaction with a specific company. And this is how this association has been created. What we do and what we aim to is to represent all the different companies, showcasing their capabilities and demonstrating what currently they can deliver to all the different markets they address. Globally, and I think it's important to go back to some numbers to set the scene. 96% of companies are SMEs. And when I say SMEs, they are more S than M. They are small. Most of the companies are less than 10 employees. So it creates a starting point with a lot of fragmentation and difficulties for them to understand how they can interact with users, with stakeholders, how can they raise a voice, gain visibility. And also for them and for startups, because we can see a lot of startups created over the last few years, Copernicus is a key asset. Copernicus is absolutely needed for almost all the companies. And it's very rare then that we have a bad comment regarding Copernicus. It's diminishing every year. And it's true for Copernicus data, it's true as well for Copernicus services. And this is why when I discuss with the directors, we have a board of 14 now directors, I say 2 years ago, how can we stimulate the interaction with the institutions and make sense, make sound actions? They told me that we have to interact with some entities. And the first one that the board asked me to connect with was ECMWF. And this is how we started this new dialogue, I would say, because the dialogue existed already before, obviously. And it ended with, it started, in fact, with a memorandum of understanding, which was signed exactly 1 year ago. Now we are involved in 2 activities. You saw some of our partner, I would say this morning in the lighting station, the user persona we are partnering with. And we aim to illustrate the different benefits of the solutions that you develop, and it's really crucial to highlight the non-economical benefits, as mentioned yesterday by Even Flo in his presentation. And the second aspect is to support companies in their understanding of how they can use CAMS data and C3S data. It's a fact, the awareness is really low. And we have to leverage this because our two communities are side by side. Some are connected, obviously, with some different aspects, different points, but connections are quite limited, and we need to help this connection to grow. There is a lot of common challenges we'll all have to face. Earth observation on climate communities. There's a lot of value we can create all together, and we want to make sure that we can contribute to this.
Okay, thanks, Emmanuel. And finally, Giancarlo, from the World Food Programme side, what are you looking for? How are you intending or already benefiting from the partnership?
Yeah, we are already benefiting from the partnership for sure. For you that doesn't know, WFP is the largest organization, and we are working more than 80 countries, different level of engagement, small actions and very large programs. And we have already our clients, let's say. Our clients is an operational organization, so our clients are the country office and the regional bureaus. From there, we receive the request. The requests are, and we need to reply in a proper way. The proper way is to provide them with actionable information, reliable information, and timely information that for us is essential. When there is a crisis, you cannot say, okay, I will provide you something in a month. No, because the crisis is there. We have to. The mandate of WFP is saving life, changing life. So that's why we are working on the full cycle disaster management cycle. So let's say, from preparedness to mitigations. And as you know, the main drivers of food insecurity are the conflicts. Unfortunately, this is a period with a lot of conflicts around the globe. Economic shocks, that's the prices, food prices that change a lot, there's impact for the most vulnerables, and climate. So climate is there, is in C3S, so it's one of our source of information, one of the main source of information. And it's essential for us to produce a lot of products that then we deliver to our country office, and they set up programs, actions, and reactions in the field. So for instance, we monitor with the C3S data sets and others, for sure. Our analysis is always done mixing climate data and Earth observation data. And so we monitor the growing season at quasi-global level, let's say, for sure for our 80-plus countries. Then we provide alerts, and also we evaluate impacts of sudden onset climate shocks like tropical cyclones, floods, and also slow onset like droughts, like the example now in Southern Africa, where there is these huge droughts caused by El Niño that is affecting more or less 23 million people. Another action where we use climate data is the anticipatory actions. These are actions that we trigger with using the seasonal forecast from ECMWF. And these are very important because we start implementing actions before the shocks happen. So we help people to face and to be prepared before the shocks. So this, in principle, we see that there are some results in it's more effective and at the end of the day save life. Then the second part of our mandate, the change in life, after the shock, we try to help the people to reduce their exposure to the shocks. So this is something about mitigation, where we use historical data set coming from C3S and the climate projection to see how we can put in place adaptation practices in order to reduce the exposure of vulnerable people to climate shocks that, unfortunately, are forecasted to increase both in terms of number and strength in the future. So, broadly, this is a bit the job we do. And, but I want to stress that our actions, okay, I'm working in the headquarters and the geospatial units has to provide this information basically based on climate and earth observation data, but the request comes always from the field, and the requests sometimes are very, very difficult to find the right answer, because you can imagine the situation there is very critical, there is no data, very few, the local institutions are usually quite poor, so the requests are very precise, and that's why it's so important to have this strong collaboration with partners that are both scientific partners, data providers, and others, research, and the user community in general that can also support us to develop and then deliver appropriate products and information to our colleagues in the field. Thanks.
Thanks, Giancarlo. So from listening to your statements, I understand that all of you really put a lot of focus on the value of the data that we can provide or do provide. But of course, we provide data not only in the context of partnerships. We do provide data, particularly for C3S, openly to everybody. And we heard yesterday that there are 160,000 users of ERA 5 in particular. So you know, we wouldn't fit them on this panel here. What do you get beyond the data that you could be using anyways? You know, where is the added benefit that makes you interested in going beyond just registering, downloading the data, you know, using your in-house expertise to work with that? Maybe Ines, do you want to start on that?
Thank you. No, for us, it's also the fact that it's tailored. It's an ongoing discussion with you, but also with our member states, trying to understand what are the needs. I mean, it needs to be demand-driven in a sense. So in our meetings, but also through service, we try to understand what are the data needs, where are the gaps, and then together we work in a deliverable that it meets their needs. So there's that aspect, and then obviously the reliability, the credibility of data. I mean, that's very important as well.
Okay. And maybe Giancarlo, you have also an opinion on that?
It's very similar, because as I said, it's important to be in this community, because okay, we have a team. They are working on this kind of using these data sets, but we need to have this interface with the user community and the support from ECMWF with specific technical stuff. Then I would like to add is the credibility of this data that I see in most of the countries where we work. ECMWF is really high-level credibility, so when you arrive there with some analysis based on ECMWF data, usually a local institution, they are keen to use that. So this is, I think, it can be highlighted as well.
Emmanuel, you may have a different perspective on this, particularly because, of course, the companies organized in ERSC are making their business around working with the data and adding the value on top of the data. So they, you know, probably you're looking really for the data and then addressing the downstream market.
I think there is two key components I would like to highlight. It's the access to community and be part of this community. First one is that when we, in the context of an activity, map the different use cases delivered by, showcased by private sector actors, we were very surprised to see that we didn't know most of them. So it's really highlight that there is a lot of private companies acting, but we are not connected currently with them in the Earth observation ecosystem we represent. So there is, I think, a really interesting way to move forward in order to strengthen the different communities all together and to nurture themselves. The second aspect is, yes, the data, for sure, but I would say as well models that you can provide access to. And this is clearly where the future will be. Earth observation is moving really fast currently because there is A lot of different new capabilities launched, yes, true. There is a lot of different people who enter the Earth observation industry with no real space background. They consider data as a source of information, and they will convert it into something which will be sound. Okay, but before it was much more on the now or the past, thanks to the beautiful archive that we have. But thanks to the capability of the models in the future, Earth observation has a capability to inject this into the services they deliver to the user. And I think this is where a significant part of the value will be. It will help, for example, to close the gap between the local authorities' needs or the challenge they are facing currently. Yes, it's interesting to know what are the amount of water that they have today or they had yesterday, but in 2 years' time, all this will impact the capability of the farmers or authorities to deal with water management or crops harvesting and so on. And this is something that companies are now investing a lot, only a few. And I think this is something that we have to develop significantly because there is a lot of interest and so business for members.
And so when you say we, you mean ERSC?
ERSC at large. I want to insist, we don't work only for members,
Yeah.
we work for the whole industry, and all what we are doing is share with all the different companies available on the ERSC website or tools. So, yes.
Now, Stein, this must be a problem for you because if all your users are now looking for partnerships to look at having bilateral discussion, this will very quickly go beyond the capability of what we can do. What's your response to this?
This is what I should ask you. No. Indeed, we are selective in with whom we have a partnership, and in the end, what's important is once you invest in a partnership, you have to make sure that you continue and that you can really capitalize on this initial investment. It's not just this signature of an MOU with a glass of champagne and say, look, now we have a partnership, and you do a press release. It's all the work behind the scenes to make it work. It's about trying to understand each other's language, trying to explain the added value of ERA 5, explain what ERA 5 stands for. It starts from this sometimes. That's why knowledge transfer and training is very important. And that's why it's also important to say, look, we have these partnerships, we have these established partnerships. Let's first make sure that they work, that they have a continuity of activities, and then gradually see, okay, which are the additional ones which you should continue and should advance further on.
In your introduction, you also mentioned this function of catalyzing new engagements through these partnerships, and I think we heard from you, or including Roman in his presentation earlier, that your clients are also benefiting from the interactions and what we're working through together. So, is there something that we can do to build on that more than we have been currently?
I mean, I think we're certainly very conscious. I mean, so we're working hard on the partnership now to have a tool that works in practice. This is objective number one. But I think we're very conscious that this is not something that's only being done for the benefit of EIB, precisely because I think the challenges that we're trying to address are the same challenges that are basically out there in the entire investor community at the moment. I mean, again, I just echo a little bit the points. The regulatory environment in the EU now has transformed in the last years. And so anybody who's developing a project and seeking private sector finance will need to address questions around how their project has looked at and examined risks emerging from physical climate change risks. But building on your earlier point, there's loads of data out there, yes, but this is what Roman was alluding to. The standardization's not there, the language is not there. It's all ad hoc. It tends to be. So, hopefully, what we can do through this partnership is help take some further steps, in trying to address, common challenges, whether we're talking, extreme wind is very different for a wind farm than for a ground-based solar plant, etc. I mean, it's all about, what do we even mean by extreme wind? Is it not my field, but is it wind per 3 seconds, per minute, per day, per watt? We lose a lot, Roman spoke to this, we're losing a lot of time by having these type of conversations, and what we'd like to do through the tool is to have something that's where we can pose the right questions with our clients. We can work with them, engage with them to help understand the way they're seeing the risks around the project, and then expand that out into the investor community. And that takes us into a discussion around the partnership we have with public banks, multilateral development banks, banks like the European Central Bank, which is doing a lot of good work in climate space in general, also with commercial banks. So yeah, small steps, we need to be focused. We start with trying to crack what we can now, but very conscious that the real value of this is to leverage it out into the community more broadly.
Giancarlo, would that also be an avenue for you, or are your users, clients too ad hoc in their requirements? So an operational tool is beyond what you can fathom.
I think that one of the pillars of the WFP strategy is to work with the national institutions, strengthening national institutions. So we have a lot of relations with them. The main entry point for us is the Meteorological Agency, so something related to climate. And so we support them in developing climate hazard early warning systems that allow, this is a long job to do, but it's something that is extremely important to have a national and early warning system that works properly and produce the right informations. And I think this is, and also the anticipatory action are done usually with the collaboration of the local institutions. So there is room for that, for collaborating. And as I said, ECMWF has a large credibility at global level, and I think that there is room to collaborate with them in order to support them in using this kind of a data set, and how to analyze these kind of data sets, and also trying to reply to their specific needs, because can you imagine from Afghanistan to Mozambique or Haiti, the needs are completely different. The type of climate hazard is completely different. So this is something that I think that your portfolio, the portfolio of products that you have in C3S and ECMWF as well, we can really support and identify the proper products with them. Another component is the training, is to support them also not just with prepared and delivered products, but really creating the knowledge and the capacity at local level.
Before I turn to you and ask you for ideas and wishes what we can improve, I would like to ask you in the audience to think about any questions that you may have to the panelists. I've committed to pick up a bit of the time that we lost in the previous session, so I won't go until 1:45. But yeah. Start thinking if you do want to have a question here. This discussion has instigated some thoughts, and then I would like to turn to you, Ines. Do you have something that you think maybe from this conversation or from preparing for coming here that you think how we can make our cooperation, our partnership more effective, more tangible for your users in the Mediterranean region?
Yeah, thank you. Initially, our first stakeholders that we try to reach out are the member states, but obviously we try to reach out to the stakeholders at large, so the communities on the ground as well. So I think that is also sometimes the challenge to actually try to reach. I mean, first of all, like the demo cases that we developed, that first two, they were just for raising awareness. That was the goal. The new ITT on renewable energy. We have higher expectations for that one. We actually want to make it relevant for developers of projects on the ground to actually explore the data sets. So for us, it's also about the outreach at large, how we can make sure that we are engaging the stakeholders at large. I was very excited with the posters that you had here. So I see that you're also trying to reach out to academia and institutions. So that is also one of the aspects that we're trying to engage when we reach out to the stakeholders at large. But I'm here and hopefully with brainstorming and hoping to receive also suggestions on how we can make it more effective.
Same question to you.
Thank you. Well, we are just at the beginning of this partnership, so we are in the learning phase still, really exciting. As you say, Stein, this is all these vocabularies that we need to align, for example, in order to smooth the interaction between the different parties. And this is really valuable. We have a lot of experience in this as well with other projects we did before with ESA, for example, the best practices. And I think there is as well some methodologies that we can propose in the future. We will see how the work will evolve. The steps that have been mentioned yesterday and the benefit analysis is something that ESC designed with the support of ESA and with Evenflow before. But we have additional methodologies that potentially could be really sound as well. So we will see in the upcoming months what can be done in order to maximize the value for all.
Okay. Thank you. Eduard. You're a banker. You're very clear about the value of things for you. So, how can we improve?
I was curious how you're going to end that sentence after you're a banker. ... But it was thank you, and it wasn't too bad. I've had worse. No, look. Okay, how can we improve things? I mean, my flippant answer would be it would be helpful if we could clone the various teams involved. Chiara, I don't know where she is, Roman, etc., etc. So there's a short-term issue on just because the expectations are high and just getting the work done. But that's normal. I think two points spring to mind. I mean, one would be that I think as we begin to get into a more practical tool, is we need to think a little bit about the trying to bring in these other ecosystems. So I've talked a little bit about whether it's in going beyond our immediate clients and thinking about some of the commercial banks, some of the other public banks, European Central Bank, would be, I think, an immediate thing that we could potentially do to try to make sure we leverage as much as possible. Yeah, that's probably the immediate step. And then, I mean, and just perhaps just to conclude, I mean, we're very, very happy with how things are going now. I forgot the obvious point, actually, which is, it is, we're delighted with how things have been working. We found it very constructive, professional, and as I say, we see very much the strategic value of the partnership. So thank you to all various colleagues. I may not even know you personally, but thank you all for those of you who are working on this, because it's very much appreciated.
Thanks. And Giancarlo, do you have a wish on your list that you want to leave us with?
More or less, I've already mentioned it, but I think that we had some good experience with some other partners, and working on specific, let's say, design together some specific, let's call them projects or whatever, and that try to reply to specific answer coming from the regional, from the country office, from our colleagues, that we are not able really to answer in the proper way, or sometimes not with good timing, so because it's too much workloaded. So I think that's taking some small example here and there. We have a lot. Can you imagine? That could be a nice starting point to see how we can strengthen. I think it could be also a learning by doing for each of us that coming from a bit different worlds and using the same data at the end. And I think this learning by doing, how we can better interact together and with the aim to produce something important and actionable, I repeat, actionable, timely, available for our colleagues.
You want to respond to any of this time?
Oh, my main response is I really want to thank the partners to team up with us. It's very important. And it's very important because we learn a lot about our added value. That's the value. We learn how we are perceived. We learn how we can create added value, where we need to improve. And this is the other side of scientific development. So you can evolve by doing innovation intrinsic to the science, but you can also evolve through user requirements and by learning what this means. And of course, there's a balance between requirements and what's feasible. And this balance is something which we need to keep at ECMWF. But in the first place, I want to thank to give this opportunity. And these partnerships are really gold in terms of learning what we need to do and how we need to improve.
Thanks for that. So now, as indicated, I want to turn to you, and I see Chris has an urgent need to address the panel. So, is there a microphone that we have for Chris?
So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Chris Stewart and I coordinate the training activities at ECMWF. So training was mentioned a few times, I think by Stein and also some of the other panelists. And of course, that's one way to address some of these needs, especially considering that, custom products, custom applications, there's a limit to how many resources we have. But it's just a question to the panelists, given that you have such widely varying communities from different areas, from different sectors. Giancarlo mentioned from Afghanistan to various different countries. It's the needs vary considerably. So how could we? And also with training, we do have limited resources, but it's an easier way to address these needs than through custom products or applications. But the question is, how could we try to somehow focus the training needs? Who do we want to target? How do we decide who to target? How do we decide, what needs to address? And it'd be interesting just to hear, if you have any reflections on that.
Does anyone have an immediate response to that?
I can try. How exactly, I don't know yet, but this is clearly something that we heard from our members, that the access to data on the RED process is something which is not easy by default even for the guys who are really familiar with processing Earth observation data, for example. So there is some tuning, customizing that could be relevant, and this is what we want to explore in the upcoming weeks and months to really make a proposal, or potentially some adaptation could be done in order to facilitate the uptake for our members.
What I can see, as I say, I come from an operation organization, so I give you a quick reply. This time, I don't know if it's the right one, but it could be nice to have seen that there is a large spectrum of climate shocks. We can try to identify some trainings specifically for each. For instance, tropical cyclones, our country office that are interested to tropical cyclones can participate, or we can organize with them something. So in a way that how we can use, which are the needs, how we can calculate the probability of, how we can calculate the return period of, something like that can really help in leveraging on your data sets. Something that can really help them to understand and to do some planning, or at least have a disaster actionable plan that can base it on some evidence coming from science. That's something related on climate shock, just an entry point to do it very easily. Otherwise, the other option is to learn one by one what are their needs. But it's feasible, a bit longer from our point of view. But something like that could be relatively easy to start implementing.
Okay, thank you. Ines?
Yeah. Now, if I may, for us, especially in the new app that we'll be launching together on renewable energy, for sure we see a lot of demand. We want to tweak it and brainstorm with you together and also with our stakeholders because we don't want the apps to be just a one-off. It needs to be an ongoing engagement, and ideally having different trainings, I mean, covering our region, especially the southern shore. It's very important, and I mean, we have limited resources, of course, so we need to partner and cooperate also with our member states. But for us, the value added is also in the knowledge transfer and bringing together the relevant stakeholders. And obviously, we need first and foremost also to define what are our target users, whom we are targeting, because then we would need to tweak different trainings. But yes, I think that that ranks very high in our priority list, the trainings.
Chris, did I understand you're offering lots of training? That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much. That's what I've taken from this.
Yeah, well, it is something, you know, as an operational service, training is a key component. So, you know, as with user support and you know, evaluation and quality control, training is one component of that. And just, you know, from hearing some of your answers as well, I get that, you know, I mean, an individual training can go so far. You want to somehow increase the impact as much as possible. So, you know, obviously trying to represent as much as possible the needs from as many people so we can address these, maybe also with resources, you know, standalone resources that, and then we could have a kind of, you know, train the trainer approach to then disseminate these resources across the different communities. So these are things that we're thinking about, and we're already in discussion with, you know, some of you to kind of go along this way. But yeah, it's an effort, and it's a real challenge to address as much as possible these different needs with what we have, to be as you know, as efficient as possible. But yes, we are offering it. So
maybe if I mean, Chris, I was a bit flippant there, but I think also on our side, I mean, that would we take it very seriously. I mean, that indeed, as I was saying, it's that idea of, we know we're touching on different ecosystems, and so how we can begin to, I mean, first we need to get the tool. But once we're there, I think we'd be very interested to have that discussion about how to efficiently disseminate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I would like to close this panel. They will be available during the lunch break, of course. But first of all, let me thank them for your availability and your statements. And I hope we've been able to spotlight a little bit where we do see the value in exemplary cases. There are others that are not on this stage, a few very important ones, and we're also, of course, exploring, you know, continuously how we can continue to add value and make that scalable. I mean, that I think is also something that has come not only in the training facet, but also in the other, in the actual application, dedicated specific applications development, co-design really, where there are scalability issues that we will be addressing through these partnerships, but also, you know, separately to that. So thank you. Enjoy your lunch. I'm looking to you, Sam. Do we have to make any other announcements before people get up?
No, I'm just going to say thank you very much to all the panelists and the presenters of the earlier session. It was a really insightful morning. Just drawing you to the slide I mentioned earlier. So there's the final session on evolving society and policy needs. If there's any questions that you've thought of in this morning's session and you want to raise in this afternoon's panel session, please add them to Slido. If not, think about them and raise their hand in the session. So thanks very much. Please go to lunch, enjoy it, be back at 2 o'clock. Thank you.